Something I've been thinking about lately in regards to the whole Minnesota/California fraud situation. Nick Shirley's kind of an idiot. Like, I mean, really, if you watch any of his videos or you listen to him for any period of time, he's not all that exceptional of an individual. He's not that smart, really. He's not very articulate. I mean, maybe a little acoustic. I mean, I can sympathize, but he's not very well spoken. He doesn't seem to have any particularly, like, great skills. He didn't do anything revolutionary or groundbreaking. He just literally walked into a couple of places that some guy, I think his name was David, that was helping him, like, was pretty sure there was fraud going on. He just walked in, pointed a camera at him, said, "Hey, is there fraud going on?" I mean, 90% of men in the country probably could do what he did just as well, if not better. He's not all that special. So how did he win? See, I think that's kind of the thing that, like, I know a lot of people who are ragging on him kind of say this sort of stuff, and I mean, in a sense, they're not wrong, but he won. And by that, I mean, if he was looking to, expose, systemic fraud in our social safety net system, mission accomplished. If he was trying to get government action to solve the problem, we just had all those raids, at the Leering Center, among others. Mission accomplished. If he was wanting to do effectively political activism or action, he wanted to change the landscape of Minnesota's, political environment. Timmy Walls ain't running for re-election now, isn't he? That, and he's trying to take credit for rooting out the fraud after essentially saying that there is no fraud, and also I think that Nick Shirley is a creep. Which kind of sounds like a self-report to me, but what do I know? And the fact that Nick Shirley is just so incredibly normal, like, I don't want to say basic, or like just average, really, and that he could do all this, not quite single-handedly, but almost single-handedly. His is the name that's attached to it, right? I think really speaks volumes to sort of the state of the modern governmental safety net and how it's being used and who's using it and who's overseeing it. Because literally, well, not quite literally, but just about literally, the only thing Nick Shirley did was walk into a handful of places with a camera, turn around 360 degrees, say, "Where the kids at?" And that's all it took. Now, these are people who are receiving benefits from government programs that were slinging out millions to billions of dollars. They were very well funded, very large. And yet, they had so little oversight that a 20-something, I don't even think the kid was he in college? Did he go to college? Did he have any sort of, like, formal education over a high school diploma? He didn't need it for what he did. It was the simplest freaking thing ever. He didn't need a crack team of, FBI agents and forensic accountants or anything like that. Just literally done. And it's not like he was some, like, Mr. Beast level YouTuber with a huge audience beforehand. I'd never heard of him. You never heard of him. Now he's a household name, deservedly so. I just realized I need a spicy thing to feed him, so let's go pull a bunch of weeds and hope we get a carrot. So I think that leaves us with basically three very distinct possibilities. Either number one, everyone who's working in the government is so blitheringly, just mediocrely incompetent that they were not capable of even doing something that a baseline, just normal guy could do. Nick Shirley's basically a normal guy with below normal oratory skills. Have I pulled all the weeds? What the hell is this? And apparently he's better at doing the government's, like, anti-fraud investigations than the government is. I mean, it's a possibility. I don't think it's very likely. That's why I mentioned it first. But I suppose, alternatively, it could mean that the people who were in charge of it just simply didn't care, didn't want to do their jobs. They weren't incompetent. They were just lazy. They were just writing checks and just sending them out without any real oversight. Apparently some of these places would get they would get an inspection, they'd get a failing grade, and they'd shut down, but there'd be no punishment, so they just take the sign off, put a sign that was spelled slightly differently on, start up the exact same business, and start getting checks again, because apparently the people doing it just didn't care. More likely is, the purpose of a system is what it does. Essentially, you have a bunch of people who are, generally speaking, very avowed redistributionists of one description or another. Socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever. Or they're just people who believe in reparations or any of these other sorts of things. So they just saw that they had a system that was capable of throwing millions to billions of dollars at people they thought should be getting free money. So they just let it ride. And there's also the distinct possibility that it was politically motivated, in that if any of these people or their relatives have the ability to vote because they are citizens, or just doing it illegally, because, I mean, if someone is going to defraud the welfare system for millions of dollars, flagrantly, without even really hiding the fact that they're doing it, what are the chances they would try to vote illegally? What are the chances that the people who are allowing them to steal millions of dollars, knowing full well which party the people who are receiving those millions of dollars are going to vote for, why would they even bother to check them to stop them either, right? It's kind of like the SPLC thing. Once you realize this sort of thing, you have to start asking yourself all sorts of questions about what else is possible, and we're just not looking for it. Oh, hey, nice one. That's kind of basic, but okay. And we know that these sorts of things don't get checked on because we'll look at the Minnesota and California welfare fraud. That it was just happening for a really long time and no one was bothering to check or do anything about it. Where else is that sort of thing happening, do you think? I mean, the possibilities are nearly endless for all sorts of weird skullduggery that could be going on, because ordinary citizens, for the most part, don't have the capacity to investigate these things, or at least they don't have the spare time. And like you see in California, where they're trying to basically pass a new law to make doing what Nick Shirley did functionally illegal. If you try to investigate it, the people who are defrauding the system can get you in trouble. Because it's built to protect them while it's stealing from you through taxes. Taxation, kind of theft, right? And generally speaking, we tolerate said theft because we assume that those taxes are going to go towards things like, national defense, or helping people who actually need it, or building and maintaining infrastructure. And instead, we still have potholes where going to war in the Middle East over just any random nonsense that they want to cook up on any particular month. Our, roads are full of potholes. Our veterans still homeless and racked by PTSD. But if you try and take, a BMW away from some guy who showed up just last month because he won a lottery from Honduras, that's just beyond the pale. You can't be doing that. It's madness. But the exact purpose of the system probably is that madness. There's a whole lot of reasons why you'd want people to be beaten down and demoralized. But enough blackpilling. I just thought I'd point that out. TLDR, Nick Shirley, not a very, impressive guy. Except that he's awfully damn brave, and sometimes that's all it takes. All you need is brute force, ignorance, and gumption, and you can literally change the course of history. And, if that ain't inspiring, I don't know what is. So, Godspeed and stay safe, Nick, because at least I'm rooting for you. I think a lot of people are, even if they don't want to admit it publicly. You'd be amazed how many people don't want to admit what they actually think publicly because they're terrified of the person who's sitting behind them and what the person sitting behind them might say. Which is made doubly hilarious by the fact that the reason they are willing to say that about, watching over your shoulder is because they know that they think that someone else or even you are watching over their shoulder, and if they were to do it, then they're the ones who would catch the heat. So now they got to act like they're completely above catching any of the heat because they're such a great virtue signaling guy. And you can tell they're a great virtue signaling guy because they're just waiting to jump on anyone who says anything. All the meanwhile, they're looking behind themselves to make sure nobody's about to say something about them. If you've ever heard of the term preference cascade, I'll admit, it's probably huffing copium, but it gives a man hopium. Alright, I'll cut it off and get to actually stramming. Catch you later, YouTube.